They had forgotten what humans were capable of. For centuries, the Galactic Council believed Earth was tamed, civilized, and compliant, a silent member in their vast empire of worlds. But peace was never built on equality. It was built on control. And when they overstepped, when they touched what humanity held sacred, something ancient and unstoppable awoke. Humanity's rage, quiet for generations, finally exploded. It began with a single transmission. A trembling alien delegate stood before the council chambers, his voice breaking as he spoke the words that would echo across the stars. The humans are mobilizing. The great species of the galaxy, once confident in their power, stared at each other in disbelief. Mobilizing? Against them? Humanity hadn't waged a war in over 200 years. They were traders, scientists, explorers. But under that calm exterior still burned the same fire that once turned deserts into cities and moons into colonies. The same drive that had carried them from Earth to the edge of the Milky Way. No one noticed the first signs. The sudden silence of human embassies, the quiet evacuation of colonies, the encrypted messages pulsing through deep space. To the Council, it looked like weakness. They thought humanity was retreating. They didn't understand that humans were preparing. Every nation, every shipyard, every old fleet resting in the dark was waking up. The black banners of Earth, long folded away in museums, were raised once again. The spark had been small, a diplomatic insult, they said. A misunderstanding, the Council claimed. But the truth was simpler and far darker. The Council had made a decision that stripped Earth of its sovereignty, placing its colonies under direct alien supervision. They said it was for the stability of the galaxy. They said humans had grown too ambitious. And when humanity protested, they were silenced. One colony resisted and was erased. An entire world gone, its people vaporized in what the Council called a necessary action. That was the day the silence ended. Deep beneath the mountains of Mars, old war rooms lit up for the first time in centuries. Generals who had become historians returned to their command posts. Civilian engineers transformed factories overnight. The hum of industry filled the void as massive shipyards came alive. Earth's hidden strength revealing itself piece by piece. Humanity had not forgotten how to fight. They had simply chosen not to. Until now. Across the galaxy, rumors spread faster than light. Some said Earth was building a fleet beyond imagination, ships darker than space itself, armed with weapons banned by the Council long ago. Others whispered that humanity had created something new, something that could rewrite the laws of war. The truth was somewhere in between. Humanity wasn't building just ships, they were building a message. In the Council's great halls, arrogance turned to anxiety. The alien empires that once saw humans as useful allies now feared what would come next. Delegates argued endlessly, each blaming the other for pushing humanity too far. Some called for negotiation, others demanded preemptive action. But no one could agree, because no one truly understood what they had awakened. The humans didn't speak. Not one official transmission came from Earth. Their communication channels went dark. Even their diplomats disappeared. The galaxy waited in a tense, breathless quiet. And then, the first sign came. A Council battleship, one of their largest, was found drifting near the Orion Belt. No distress call, no survivors. Its hull was torn open as if something had crushed it from within. The message was clear. Humanity was done talking. But not everyone within the Council believed the humans could truly pose a threat. "They are emotional," one alien chancellor sneered. "They act on impulse. When they calm down, they'll come crawling back." That arrogance would cost them everything. Because humans didn't rage blindly. They calculated. They planned. Their anger wasn't chaos, it was precision. Every move was deliberate, every target chosen with purpose. They weren't lashing out for revenge, they were demanding recognition. respect, and this time, the galaxy would listen. On Earth, the skies thundered with the launch of ships, sleek black vessels that vanished into the stars like shadows. Their engines burned silent, their trajectories hidden. Families watched from the surface, eyes filled not with fear, but pride. For the first time in generations, humanity stood united. No borders, no factions, just one species, moving with a single heartbeat. Among them were those who remembered history, the wars, the sacrifices, the times when humanity had faced extinction and refused to bow. Those memories ran deep, older than any council decree. They knew what the galaxy had forgotten. Humans don't start wars, but they finish them. Reports began to flood in. Council patrols destroyed without trace. Communication lines severed. Strategic outposts gone dark. No debris, no warning, only silence. It wasn't a war yet. It was a statement. The message whispered through the void. You went too far. The council tried to respond. They deployed fleets, sent envoys, even issued public apologies. But the damage was done. Humanity wasn't listening anymore. This wasn't about revenge for one colony. It was about everything the galaxy had taken from them. Autonomy, respect, dignity. They had been treated as tools, as servants, as a lesser species. Now they were showing what a lesser species could do when pushed too far. Even the stars seemed to tremble. The balance of power that had stood for millennia was shifting. The ancient empires felt it, the change in the currents of fate. Every leader, every commander, every soldier across the galaxy could sense it. Humanity was coming. And in the center of it all, the council sat in fear, watching the darkness around them grow thicker. Their intelligence reports painted a grim picture. Human fleets had vanished into deep space, their numbers unknown. Probes sent to monitor them never returned. Whole sectors had gone silent. Something was moving in the dark, something vast. The reckoning had begun, but no one knew what form it would take. Some believed humanity would strike the Council's core worlds directly. Others thought they would dismantle the Empire piece by piece, turning allies into enemies. But whatever their plan was, one truth was certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. And somewhere, far beyond the Council's reach, a human commander watched the stars from the bridge of a massive ship. The light of distant worlds reflected in their eyes as they gave the quiet order that would change everything. Begin the operation. The screens flickered to life, thousands of ships responding in perfect unison. The void of space came alive with movement, a tide of silent power sweeping outward. Humanity wasn't seeking peace anymore. They were reclaiming their place among the stars. And as the first waves disappeared into hyperspace, the galaxy held its breath. Because everyone knew, when humanity's rage explodes, nothing can stop what comes next. And this was only the beginning. They thought humans had gone soft. That the species who once clawed their way out of gravity wells and into the stars had finally learned to kneel. The Galactic Council believed Earth was harmless, a planet of diplomats, traders, and scientists who played by the rules. For a long time, that was true. Humanity wanted peace, wanted to belong. But peace built on arrogance never lasts, and the Council's arrogance ran deep. When they crossed the line, when they overstepped, the mask slipped, and the galaxy saw what humanity really was: patient, dangerous, and unforgettable. It started quietly. A single broadcast leaked out of council space, images of a human colony burning, its surface turned to glass after what they called a corrective strike. The council insisted it was an accident, a weapon test gone wrong. But the people on Earth knew better. The colony had refused to surrender its independence after the council imposed new control laws. They didn't comply, and so they were erased. For weeks, the human governments stayed silent. No protests, no retaliation, just stillness. The council mistook that silence for fear. They told their citizens humanity had accepted the punishment, that the Earth problem had been handled. But on the dark side of Luna, lights began to flicker in long-abandoned command bunkers. Shipyards that hadn't built warships in 100 years suddenly stopped producing transports and began laying down armor plates. Civilian engineers vanished from their day jobs, pulled into classified projects under the surface of Mars. Humanity wasn't afraid. They were preparing. Across the galaxy, sensors caught strange readings near old Terran outposts. Fleets moving in patterns that didn't make sense. Entire communication networks shutting down. The Council's Intelligence Bureau sent reports filled with warnings, but the High Chancellor dismissed them. "Humans are emotional," he said. "They lash out, then calm down. They're just venting." They weren't. The rage that had once fueled humanity's rise, the same force that carried them through wars, disasters, and centuries of struggle, had been building beneath the surface. They had worked so hard to bury it under treaties and cooperation to prove they could be trusted. But when the Council stripped away their rights, destroyed their colony, and called it necessary, that buried fury came roaring back. Out on the edges of space, patrols began to vanish. Entire crews went missing, their ships found drifting and silent. No hull damage, no signs of battle, just empty vessels, as if their crews had vanished into thin air. Then the rumors started. Stories of massive human warships operating in deep space, their hulls black as night, their weapons systems invisible to scanners. The Council laughed it off as myth, until one of their dreadnoughts disappeared. That was the first open sign. A fleet of alien vessels, 300 strong, went dark while patrolling near human space. Their last transmission was a panicked voice shouting, "They're everywhere!" before the signal cut. When search teams arrived weeks later, all they found was debris, melted metal, and silence. The Council blamed pirates. The humans said nothing. Inside the halls of the Galactic Council, tension grew. Delegates argued over what to do, each pointing fingers. Some demanded sanctions, others wanted immediate war. But a few older species, the ones who had studied humanity's history, said only one thing: don't provoke them further. They remembered old Earth stories of how humans fought when cornered, how they could turn loss into fuel, how their greatest strength was not their weapons, but their will. Meanwhile, humanity's transformation was complete. Every factory, every orbital dockyard, every research lab that once served peaceful exploration now stood under military command. But there was no grand announcement, no declaration of war. Humanity had learned from centuries of being underestimated. This time, they would not warn their enemies. They would show them. Across the colonies, ordinary people did their part. Farmers donating metals, engineers volunteering for night shifts, even children learning evacuation drills. It wasn't fear driving them, it was unity. For the first time in centuries, humanity stood as one world, one purpose, one heartbeat. Then came the first message. It appeared on every council frequency at once, overriding communications across thousands of systems. A simple sentence written in bold white text against a black background. You took one of ours. We will take back everything. No one knew who sent it. No one dared to respond. Panic spread. The Council scrambled fleets to defend core worlds. But even with all their strength, they were too slow. Human ships appeared where they shouldn't have been able to. They struck fast, precise, vanishing before counterattacks could form. Their technology seemed decades ahead of what the Council believed possible. Someone whispered that humans had been preparing for this all along, that they'd never trusted the Council's peace to last. And maybe that was true. Because humanity had always known what the galaxy refused to admit. Peace only works when everyone respects it. When one side rules by fear, peace is just a pause before the storm. And now, that storm had arrived. Still, there were those who thought they could reason with Earth, that a few apologies and political favors could calm things down. They sent envoys, hoping to find someone, anyone, willing to talk. None returned. Every ship that entered human space disappeared from sensors. All the Council received were fragments of static and a faint echo, like a heartbeat pulsing through the void. Something was coming. From the dark edge of the Milky Way, long-range scanners picked up movement, massive fleets traveling in formation, hundreds of ships strong, heading toward Council territory. But their transponders didn't match any known database. No flags, no codes, only a single symbol painted across their hulls. A burning world surrounded by chains, broken in half. The galaxy had seen many wars, but never one like this. Humanity wasn't fighting for territory or resources. They weren't seeking conquest. They were answering a question the Council should never have asked. What happens when you push humans too far? As the Council's fleets mobilized, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Every sensor array pointed toward the dark sector where humanity's armada had last been seen. Then, one by one, the readings vanished, jammed, silenced, wiped clean. And somewhere in that silence, on the bridge of a ship larger than anything the Council had ever built, a human commander stood watching the stars. "Target confirmed," a voice said quietly. The commander's eyes narrowed. "Then let's begin." The ship's lights dimmed. Engines roared to life, rippling through the void like thunder. Across the galaxy, the night sky began to change. The reckoning had begun, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the Galactic Council understood the truth every human child was taught from birth. Peace is earned, not given. Because when humanity's rage explodes, nothing in the stars can stand in its way, and this was only the beginning. The first strikes came without sound. No warnings, no broadcasts, just the quiet collapse of entire communication networks across Council space. Worlds that once glowed with light now hung dark and silent, their satellites drifting aimlessly. The Council's fleets scrambled to respond, but every attempt to trace the attackers ended the same way. Ghost signals, false readings, ships vanishing mid-jump. Panic began to seep through the cracks of the great empire. For the first time, the Council realized they were no longer the ones in control. On the bridge of one of Earth's warships, the crew worked in a focused silence. The ship's captain watched as holographic displays showed red icons spreading across the star maps. Council defense stations, gone. Every strike was planned, measured. They weren't trying to destroy everything at once. They were dismantling the Empire's stability, cutting away its eyes and ears before the real assault began. In the Council chambers, chaos reigned. Delegates shouted over one another, each blaming someone else for humanity's retaliation. Some demanded full mobilization, others begged for peace. A few of the older species sat quietly, remembering old warnings. "You don't corner predators," one elder said softly. "You leave them a way out." But you didn't. No one listened. Pride still blinded them, even as their fleets burned. Back on Earth, the atmosphere had changed completely. The fear that once filled the streets was gone. Factories worked around the clock, building new ships and weapons. Even ordinary citizens took part, repairing drones, coding navigation systems, sending supplies to the front. Humanity wasn't fighting for conquest. They were fighting for their future. Every strike, every mission, was a message carved into the stars. You don't decide our fate. Among the human fleet, there were divisions. Some wanted to destroy the Council outright, to show them what true fear felt like. Others believed in restraint, that humanity had to prove it was better than those who had tried to control them. The arguments grew heated, but the mission remained the same. Justice first, then peace, on their terms. In a small outpost orbiting a dead moon, a young technician monitored encrypted transmissions. He had once worked for the Council, but defected when he saw what they had done. Now he was helping the humans by feeding them coordinates of hidden military caches and strategic routes. He knew if the Council found him, he'd be erased, but he couldn't go back. He'd seen the truth. Humanity wasn't the monster the Council painted them to be. They were simply tired of being treated like they didn't belong among the stars. Meanwhile, deep in Council space, one world refused to stay silent. The planet Valun, home to one of the most powerful Council races, demanded that humanity be exterminated before the rebellion spread. They began building a fleet of their own, larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Billions of tons of metal, powered by fear and pride. Their leaders called it the final answer. But to humanity, it was just another threat to crush. Tensions inside the Council grew worse. Leaks exposed how several races had secretly supplied weapons to humans decades ago, hoping to use them as pawns against their rivals. Now those same weapons were being turned back on them. Old alliances fractured overnight. The unity that once defined the Council was gone, replaced by suspicion and desperation. Humanity hadn't just started a war, they'd cracked the foundation of an entire civilization. Yet even as victory after victory filled the human news channels, unease spread among the fleet. Something wasn't right. Reports showed that the Council's central command had gone silent, but no one could confirm its location. It was as if their leadership had vanished into the void. Some believed they were preparing a counterstrike. Others feared something worse, that the Council had built something capable of turning the tide. In the heart of the human fleet, the commander gathered her officers. The holographic projection of the galaxy hung before them, littered with red marks showing every known Council stronghold. "They'll try to draw us in," she said quietly. "They'll pretend to retreat, make us chase them, and then strike where it hurts most, Earth." The room fell silent. Everyone knew it was possible. Humanity's fleet was powerful but stretched thin. Protecting their home world meant pulling ships from the offensive, leaving them open. The choice was impossible: advance and risk losing Earth, or retreat and lose the momentum. The commander stood alone for a long moment before giving her order. "We hold our ground. Earth can defend itself now. The galaxy must see that we're not just survivors, we're the ones who will decide the next era." Far across the void, the Council's secret weapons stirred. Hidden in the shadow of a dying star, a colossal station came online. It wasn't a ship or a fleet, it was something older, something forbidden, a relic from before the Council's rule. They had sworn never to use it, but desperation had changed everything. The device pulsed with energy capable of collapsing entire systems. It was designed to end wars by ending everything. But the Council's scientists didn't understand what they were dealing with. The power they were trying to control was unstable, unpredictable, and humanity had already learned of its existence. A deep-cover spy hidden among the Council's lower ranks sent the warning home. The message was brief, only one line before the transmission cut. "They're going to erase everything." When the human leadership received the report, the realization hit hard. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. If the Council activated that weapon, the galaxy itself could fracture. Billions of lives, Council and human alike, would be lost. The commander clenched her fists. They couldn't let that happen, even if it meant working with their enemies. For the first time since the war began, humanity opened a channel, not to beg for peace, but to offer one. The transmission was simple, sent on every frequency across known space. "You built a weapon you can't control. Shut it down, or we will." No threats, no insults, just a warning. The Council's fractured leaders argued about what to do. Some wanted to respond, others wanted to ignore it. In the end, they did nothing. Hours later, human scouts reported massive energy readings near the forbidden sector. The device was powering up, time was running out. Humanity's fleets began moving in silence, cutting through the void like shadows. Every pilot knew what was at stake. This wasn't just another mission. It was a race against annihilation. The stars themselves seemed to grow darker as they approached the weapon's coordinates. The tension was suffocating, the silence heavy with expectation. Then the alarms blared. The device had activated. Energy waves rippled across nearby systems, bending space, distorting gravity. Ships struggled to maintain course as the void itself seemed to twist around them. On the bridge, the commander's voice remained calm. "All ships, engage! We end this now!" As the human fleet closed in, flashes of light erupted ahead. Council defense forces, desperate and terrified, standing between humanity and the weapon they couldn't control. Missiles and plasma fire streaked through the darkness. Battles raged across shattered moons and asteroid fields. The humans pressed forward, every ship fighting not out of hate, but to stop something far worse. And deep within that chaos, unknown to both sides, something else stirred, something watching, waiting. A signal buried beneath the weapon's activation codes, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Not human, not council, older. The humans hadn't realized that by pushing this far, they might have awakened something the galaxy had long forgotten. As the weapon's power climbed toward critical, the commander stared at the readings and whispered, "We're too late." The stars flickered. The void trembled. And then, silence. The reckoning wasn't over. It was only beginning. The stars had gone quiet. Every scanner, every ship, every station across the sector was blinded by the shock wave. For several minutes, even light itself seemed hesitant to move. Then, slowly, systems flickered back to life. What they saw left the entire human fleet frozen. The Council's weapon, the colossal structure hidden behind the dying star, was alive. A ring of blinding energy pulsed at its center, expanding and contracting like a heartbeat. Every pulse sent waves across the void, rippling through ships and sensors alike. Whatever it was doing, it wasn't just a weapon. It was changing space itself. On the bridge of the flagship, the crew struggled to steady their readings. "Gravity distortion increasing," one officer said, his voice tight with fear. "If it keeps rising, it'll tear the system apart." The commander's eyes stayed locked on the screen, watching the energy surge grow. "They've lost control," she whispered. "The Council can't stop it now." The realization hit the crew like cold water. The war had spiraled into something far worse than anyone had imagined. This wasn't just about humanity's revenge anymore. It was about survival, for everyone. The humans pressed forward, pushing through the chaos. Council fleets were scattered, disorganized. Some still tried to fight, others fled blindly into hyperspace. For the first time, it wasn't humans against aliens. It was every species running from the same unstoppable storm. Explosions lit the distance like small suns, fragments of destroyed ships drifting through the void. The energy waves twisted metal like paper. Time itself seemed to flicker, sensors recording impossible readings. Inside the Council's shattered stronghold, the remaining leaders argued in desperation. They were trapped. The station's corridors shook with every pulse from the weapon. "We can't shut it down," one scientist shouted over the alarms. "The core's gone autonomous. It's drawing from the star's collapse." No one wanted to admit what that meant. The weapon had begun feeding on the dying sun, turning its energy inward, preparing for something catastrophic. Far away, aboard the human flagship, the commander made her decision. "Prepare the fleet for full assault. We're not retreating. If that thing goes critical, every world within 10 light years is gone." Her voice was calm, but beneath the control was steel. The humans knew what they had to do. They had always known that victory would demand sacrifice. As the ships advanced, they passed through fields of wreckage, council and human alike. There was no glory in what they were seeing, just the cost of arrogance, written in fire and metal. Some of the younger soldiers stared in silence, faces pale under the glow of emergency lights. The older veterans just kept their focus. They'd seen what happened when power went unchecked. They'd lived through it once before, on Earth. The closer they got to the weapon, the more unstable space became. Debris floated in spirals, frozen in strange orbits. Time stuttered in short bursts, seconds repeating like echoes. The ship's AI struggled to maintain course. "We're inside the distortion field," one navigator said. "If it expands any further, we won't make it out." The commander didn't flinch. "We're not leaving until that thing stops." Meanwhile, deep inside the weapon itself, the Council's engineers worked frantically to regain control. But something was wrong. The power readings no longer matched the systems they had built. It was as if the machine was rewriting itself, evolving. "It's not responding to manual input," one technician whispered. "It's adapting." The core pulsed again, brighter this time, and the walls shook with a deep, resonant sound, like a heartbeat mixed with thunder. Across the human fleet, strange signals began to appear, faint transmissions in a language no one recognized, echoing through communication channels. At first, they thought it was interference. Then the signals started forming patterns, structured, deliberate, almost intelligent. "It's coming from the weapon," one analyst said. "It's broadcasting." The commander frowned. Broadcasting to who? No one had an answer. As the human ships closed in, they were met by what remained of the Council's defense fleet. The aliens, desperate and terrified, opened fire, not out of hatred, but fear. They thought the humans had caused this. The stars lit up again, missiles and plasma streaking through the void. But this battle felt different. Every explosion was smaller compared to the colossal energy building at the weapon's core. Humanity fought not for vengeance now, but for control. One last effort to stop the galaxy from tearing itself apart. Inside one of the human ships, a young communications officer stared at the incoming signal on her screen. It was faint, but repeating, a rhythmic pulse. Her fingers froze as she realized what she was seeing. "Commander," she said quietly, "that signal, it's not alien." The commander turned sharply. "Explain." The officer swallowed. "The frequency pattern. It's based on old Earth code, the kind used during the first interstellar wars. Someone's talking to us." The bridge fell silent. The commander leaned closer to the display, eyes narrowing as the code translated into a message. Only 5 words appeared. "You woke it too soon." No one understood what it meant, but they all felt the chill that came with it. The implication that something else had been hidden, something even older than the Council's empire. Humanity wasn't fighting just an enemy anymore. They were standing at the edge of something ancient, something that had been sleeping beneath the galaxy's surface for eons. The weapon pulsed again, the light so intense it blinded sensors. Ships were forced to shield their optics, entire systems shutting down. The star at the center began to collapse, its energy feeding the device like a living thing. Gravity waves tore through the sector, bending fleets out of position. The Council's forces broke apart entirely, retreating into chaos. Still, the humans pushed forward. Their ships burned through the darkness, defying every warning. They had faced extinction before. They would face it again. On the flagship, the commander gave the order. "All units, target the weapon's power conduits. We cut its heart before it consumes us all." As the first wave of missiles struck, the weapon reacted. Beams of pure energy lashed out, tearing through ships with surgical precision. Dozens vanished instantly, consumed by the expanding distortion. The remaining vessels dodged and weaved, fighting to close the distance. The noise of battle filled every channel, a storm of human determination against impossible odds. Amid the chaos, a fragment of the ancient signal broke through again. This time, the message was clearer. "It's not a weapon. It's a door." The commander's blood ran cold. The realization struck like lightning. The device wasn't designed to destroy. It was meant to open something. A gateway, a passage. To where, no one knew. And if it finished powering up, whatever was on the other side would come through. The human fleet was running out of time. Energy reading showed the core approaching full activation. If it reached critical, the entire sector would collapse. Or worse, something would emerge from the void. The commander looked at the screen, jaw tight. "We hit it harder. Everything we've got. The humans unleashed their full firepower. The weapon's outer ring cracked, sending debris spinning into space. For a moment, it seemed like it might work. The light flickered, the pulse weakened. Then, all at once, the glow turned red. The readings spiked beyond comprehension. The core wasn't dying, it was awakening. The commander's voice broke through the static. "All ships! Pull back!" But it was too late. A shockwave rippled out, sending vessels tumbling. Every star within sight bent and warped. The dying sun behind the weapon imploded, collapsing into a dark sphere that swallowed light itself. The gateway was opening. From deep within the distortion, a sound began. A low, resonant hum that didn't come through speakers but through the bones of every living being who heard it. Something vast was moving in the dark. The sensors couldn't define it, only measure the space it displaced. The commander gripped the edge of the console. "What is that?" No one answered. There were no words. The light from the core expanded until it filled every screen. The fleet's systems went blind again, and then, in the heart of that blinding storm, a shape began to emerge. Whatever it wasn't human, and it wasn't from this galaxy. The bridge lights flickered, alarms blared, and through the static, the ancient signal repeated one last time, slow, deliberate, almost like a warning. "It's coming through." The crew froze as the void split open before them, the stars stretching into a single, endless beam of light. And in that moment, every human aboard the fleet understood one thing. The war they started was nothing compared to what was about to begin. The light faded slowly, leaving behind a silence deeper than space itself. Every human ship drifted aimlessly, blinded by the blast that had torn reality apart. Systems flickered, gravity stabilizers groaned, and for a long moment, no one spoke. The bridge of the flagship was dim, filled with the sound of alarms and the steady hum of power trying to rebuild itself. The commander stared out at what remained of the weapon. The colossal ring was broken, fractured into molten arcs of metal. But behind it, in the emptiness where the dying star had once burned, something else shimmered. It was like a wound in the universe, a rip that refused to close. Colors shifted unnaturally around it, space bending and twisting like waves on water. The scanners struggled to define it. Every time the crew tried to measure its depth, the readings looped endlessly, as if the rift had no end. "Is it stable?" one officer asked quietly. "No," the commander said. "It's breathing." The words hung heavy in the air. They watched as the rift pulsed faintly, just like the weapon had before it exploded. But this pulse wasn't mechanical. It felt alive. The crew could almost feel it resonating through the hull, faint but rhythmic, like a heartbeat coming from the other side. And then, the first signal arrived. A faint echo touched every comm system across the fleet, a voice, distorted but unmistakably human. "This is the Sol Vanguard, do you copy?" The crew froze. The name sent chills through everyone who heard it. The Sol Vanguard was a legend, an experimental fleet that had vanished nearly a century ago during humanity's first expansion into deep space. They had disappeared without a trace, assumed destroyed in a failed jump experiment. Every record said they were gone. But now their signal was coming from beyond the rift. The commander hesitated. "Patch it through." The voice grew clearer, though broken by static. "We found it. We tried to contain it, but it's awake. You need to seal the breach before—" The transmission cut off in a burst of static and light. Every system across the fleet flickered again, the signal's residue echoing like a whisper, "Before it sees you." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. "That wasn't a recording," the communications officer said softly. "It was live." Before anyone could respond, the rift flared again. A surge of energy washed across the human fleet, disabling half their systems. The gravitational pull shifted violently, dragging ships toward the breach. Engines screamed as captains fought to stabilize. Some vessels weren't fast enough. They vanished into the light, their hulls twisting out of existence without sound. The rest of the fleet managed to regain control, forming a defensive perimeter around the flagship. But the damage was done. Humanity's victory had turned into a trap. Then the impossible happened. From the edge of the rift, something began to emerge. A silhouette against the distorted light. At first, it looked like a ship. But as it came closer, its form kept changing, like it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. It moved as though it were half alive, half machine. The surface shimmered with shifting patterns, reflecting pieces of ships and debris it had absorbed. The commander's voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed the fear she felt. "Focus all sensors. Identify that thing." The readings came back nonsensical, part biological, part mechanical, and part energy. "It's not Council tech," one officer said. "It's not ours either." The creature, or ship, or whatever it was, stopped moving just beyond the debris field. Then it began broadcasting, not sound, not words, but raw data. Millions of compressed signals spilling into human systems faster than they could block them. The screens filled with flashes of light and fragments of images. Cities, oceans, faces, all human. Then something else. Scenes of destruction, alien worlds burning, fleets disintegrating. It was showing them the future. Everywhere it appeared, the message was the same. It remembers. The commander turned to her officers. "Get me a secure line to Earth, now." But before the transmission could go through, another shockwave hit. The rift pulsed again, and new shapes began to appear in the void. Hundreds of them, like reflections breaking free from a mirror. They looked human, at least at first glance. Ships with familiar designs, yet wrong in subtle ways. Their hulls bore the insignia of old Earth fleets, fleets that were supposed to have been lost centuries ago. The vanished ships of humanity's past. "They're ours," a young technician whispered, eyes wide. "They're us." But as the unknown vessels drifted closer, their signals turned hostile. Their systems were active, weapons online. One of them transmitted a short message before opening fire. "You left us here." The first blast hit like thunder, tearing through a human cruiser. The fleet returned fire, but the damage was already spreading. The resurrected ships moved in perfect coordination, as if guided by a single will. They weren't fighting for the Council or for revenge. They were fighting to stop humanity from closing the rift. Whatever had taken them had turned them into something else. The commander's ship shook violently as explosions rippled through the formation. "Pull back," she ordered. "Get us clear of the breach." But the rift's gravity was growing stronger with every second. It was pulling everything in, the debris, the Council wreckage, even the broken remains of the ancient weapon. The fabric of space groaned as the rift expanded. On Earth, the transmission finally reached command. The signal was faint, fragmented by distance and interference. "This is Commander of the Earth Fleet. The breach has opened. Something came through, something using our own ships. They're not human anymore." The feed broke into static and then silence. Back in orbit, the battle became chaos. The resurrected fleet moved like a storm, cutting through human formations with terrifying precision. Their ships weren't limited by human fear or fatigue. They didn't hesitate, didn't retreat. It was as if the rift itself was controlling them, using their memories as weapons. Every human pilot who saw the enemy recognized something in their movements, patterns, strategies, even call signs from ships lost long ago. Amid the chaos, one ship broke formation and charged straight toward the rift. It was an old vessel, one that had survived every major battle of the war. Its captain sent one final message before vanishing into the light. "If they're still human in there, maybe I can bring them home." The explosion that followed shook the entire sector. The rift flared white, swallowing the ship whole. For a second, the energy readings dropped, as if the sacrifice had worked. But then, without warning, the readings spiked higher than ever before. The rift began expanding at an exponential rate, tearing the battlefield apart. "Get us out of here!" the commander shouted, gripping the console. The fleet turned, engines blazing, racing against the pull of the growing vortex. One by one, ships broke free, but hundreds didn't. They were swallowed by the light, their signals fading into static. As the surviving fleet finally escaped the gravitational field, the commander turned to look back. The rift was no longer just a wound in space. It had become a sphere of darkness, pulsing with energy, and deep inside it, faint lights began to flicker, shapes forming, growing, multiplying. It wasn't closing, it was spawning. The sensors caught fragments of the new readings, signals that shouldn't exist. Worlds, locations, entire systems that weren't part of known space. Whatever the rift had connected to, it wasn't another galaxy. It was somewhere else. The commander's voice trembled for the first time. "We didn't open a door," she said softly. "We opened a path." And on the edge of the screen, where the light met the dark, the distorted figure of a human face appeared, flickering like a reflection in broken glass. It looked straight at them, eyes glowing with that same impossible energy. It smiled, and then it spoke with a voice that was unmistakably human, but layered with something vast behind it. "You came looking for freedom," it said. "Now see what waits beyond it." The signal cut, leaving only static and the fading echo of laughter across the stars. The rift pulsed again, brighter than before, and from its depths came hundreds, maybe thousands, of returning signals. Not just human, not just alien. Something entirely new. The galaxy wasn't at war anymore. It was on the verge of becoming something unrecognizable. And humanity, once again, was standing right at the center of it. The rift had grown into a sunless sphere that dominated the void, its gravity distorting everything around it. The surviving human fleet hovered at a safe distance, engines humming quietly, weapons powered but useless. The crew stood in silence as they watched the light ripple across the edge of that impossible wound. What began as a battle for survival had become something else entirely, a confrontation with forces that defied every law they understood. Humanity had fought empires, rebellions, and ancient weapons before, but this was different. This wasn't war. It was awakening. The commander leaned against the console, her eyes fixed on the readings. "It's stabilizing," one officer whispered. "That shouldn't be possible. It should have collapsed by now." The data confirmed it. The rift wasn't dying. It was adapting. The pulse they'd felt before now aligned with something deeper, like a pattern woven into the universe itself. Every few seconds, the readings formed a rhythm, and then it clicked. It wasn't random energy. It was a signal. They ran the frequencies through translation protocols, and slowly, words began to form. Humanity, return what was taken. The message repeated, soft but firm, echoing across every comm frequency. No alien language, no distortion. It was pure, clear, and deeply human. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. "Who's sending it?" someone asked. The commander hesitated. "Maybe us," she said quietly. Before anyone could question her, the rift flared again. A wave of light washed over the fleet, and suddenly the main screens filled with images, flashes of history, not from the present, but from centuries ago. The rise of the Galactic Council, the subjugation of early colonies, the manipulation of human expansion. For so long, humanity had believed the Council discovered them by chance, but the truth played out before their eyes. The Council had created the first contact. They had manipulated Earth's early transmissions, guiding humanity's curiosity toward them. The Council hadn't feared humanity. They had shaped it, controlled its progress to prevent it from surpassing them. The revelation hit like a shockwave through every ship. Humanity's centuries of struggle had been by design. Every conflict, every treaty, every accident that slowed their rise, all orchestrated. The Council had built an empire on manipulation, not cooperation. And the ancient weapon, the one humanity destroyed, wasn't meant for defense. It was meant to erase any species that defied their control. But something had gone wrong. The weapon's power had reached beyond the galaxy, tearing through dimensions. That's what had consumed the Sol Vanguard. They hadn't died. They had become part of the rift, and now they were trying to stop it from consuming everything else. The commander turned to her crew. If this thing is alive, and if our people are inside it, we can reach them. The idea was insane. But there was no other choice. They couldn't destroy the rift without wiping out half the galaxy, and they couldn't run without it following. Humanity had one chance: to reconnect with what it had lost. The fleet moved closer, forming a formation at the rift's edge. The closer they came, the heavier the silence grew. Space itself seemed to resist their presence. As they approached, the face that had appeared earlier returned, clearer now. It was no longer distorted. It was unmistakably human, though not bound by flesh. Its voice resonated across the bridge. "You came seeking freedom," it said again. "But freedom without truth is only another cage." The commander stepped forward. "Then tell us the truth." The light around the rift dimmed, and suddenly they were no longer in space. Every ship's system went dark, replaced by a vast projection that enveloped their minds. They stood, not physically, but as consciousnesses, in what looked like a city of stars. Every light around them pulsed like a heartbeat, and within that space stood the lost crew of the Sol Vanguard, their forms flickering like living memories. "You built your future on lies they fed you," one of them said. "We saw it when we crossed the threshold. The Council used human ambition as fuel for their empire, but when the weapon opened the void, it showed us something greater. A network older than the galaxies, a living system connecting every conscious being. It wanted to merge, to evolve, but it needed a voice. It needed humanity." The commander frowned. "Then what are you now?" "We are what comes after," the Vanguard replied. "The next step in the chain. But the Council's interference corrupted the connection. If the rift stays open, it will consume every reality trying to repair itself. If you close it without balance, it will destroy you. The only way forward is to choose what kind of species humanity becomes." The light flickered again. Outside, the real world began collapsing. The rift's expansion had reached critical mass, its gravitational field pulling in entire star systems. The Council fleets that had regrouped on the outer rim were now being dragged toward the core. Their leaders broadcast pleas for assistance, but the human fleet ignored them. The same voices that once ruled the galaxy with arrogance now begged humanity for help. The commander knew what had to be done. The rift wasn't an enemy. It was evolution trying to correct itself. And the only way to stabilize it was for humanity to integrate the lost consciousnesses trapped within, to merge with what had been left behind. But that meant giving up control, allowing a new kind of humanity to emerge. The decision spread across the fleet. Some protested, fearful of losing their individuality. Others understood. It was either transformation or extinction. The commander took a breath. "Transmit the merge signal," she ordered. One by one, the ships activated their cores. Streams of light extended toward the rift, connecting the fleet like veins of energy. The rift pulsed brighter and brighter until it engulfed everything in white. For a moment, it felt like the universe itself held its breath. Then the light exploded outward, filling every sensor, every screen, every star. When it faded, the rift was gone. The battlefield was empty, the wreckage still, the stars silent. Humanity's fleet drifted quietly in the void. Systems rebooted slowly, and the crew looked around in disbelief. The readings were clear. No gravitational distortion, no anomalous energy. The rift had truly vanished. But something had changed. Every human aboard could feel it. A faint hum in their minds, a sense of connection that hadn't been there before. They could sense each other's presence, thoughts echoing faintly like whispers. Humanity had become unified in ways no technology could achieve. Earth received the transmission hours later, a simple message from the commander. The rift is sealed. We survived, but we're not the same. Across the galaxy, the Council's remaining ships went silent. Without the weapon, without control, their empire began to crumble. And for the first time in millennia, the balance of power shifted. Humanity had not only survived, it had evolved beyond what the Council could comprehend. Just when peace seemed to return, a faint pulse appeared on the outer sensors. It was identical to the signal that once marked the rift, but coming from the opposite side of the galaxy. The commander stared at the readings, her face pale. "That's not possible," she whispered. The signal grew stronger, spreading across the network faster than before. And then, through the static, a voice spoke, one that no one recognized. It wasn't human, but it spoke in perfect human language. "You opened the path," it said softly. "Now we have seen you." Every screen across the fleet went black. The hum that united humanity flickered for a brief moment, like interference in their minds. Then, silence. Far beyond the stars, another light began to form, smaller, sharper, and colder than before. Whatever the rift had connected to, it wasn't finished. Humanity had changed the rules of existence, but the universe had only just begun to answer. The stars looked different now. They shimmered faintly, like they were breathing with the same rhythm that pulsed quietly through every human heart. In the weeks following the collapse of the rift, the galaxy had fallen silent. No more council broadcasts, no more war signals. The void was peaceful again, but it wasn't the same peace humanity once knew. It was heavier, deeper, as though the universe itself was still settling after what had happened. The surviving human fleet drifted near the old frontier, orbiting the ruins of a forgotten station. They were repairing what they could, but no one was in a rush to rebuild. Everyone needed time to understand what they'd become. People spoke less and listened more, sometimes hearing faint echoes of thoughts that weren't their own. It was unsettling at first, but slowly it became familiar, like hearing distant music in another room. Humanity was connected now, not through machines or words, but something far older and more profound. The commander sat by the observation window of the flagship, watching the stars ripple faintly in the distance. Every night she wondered if the light she saw was truly starlight, or something left behind by the rift. She still felt its echo sometimes, like a heartbeat buried in her chest. "You opened the path," that last voice had said. The words haunted her, not as a threat but as a question. What had humanity actually done? Back on Earth, the aftermath of the event reshaped everything. The Council's collapse left hundreds of worlds suddenly free, and for the first time in generations, humanity stood without any chains. There were no empires giving orders, no alien rulers deciding who could rise or fall. The old colonies reached out, forming alliances of their own, connected by this new, strange awareness that linked every human mind. Conflicts that once felt inevitable now seemed senseless. People could feel the cost of hate, literally sense the weight of pain it caused others. It didn't erase greed or fear overnight, but it changed how people acted. Scientists tried to understand the transformation. Some called it a shared neural resonance, others a quantum consciousness network, but no one could explain where it came from or how it worked. The truth was simpler. It wasn't science that changed humanity. It was choice. When they reached into the rift, they hadn't just saved themselves. They had accepted responsibility for everything they were. The merging had forced humanity to confront its own reflection. Every mistake, every cruelty, every triumph. And from that, something new was born. Still, not everyone accepted the change. On the outer colonies, a group calling themselves the True Line began to rise. They claimed humanity had been corrupted by the merge, that the connection was a trap left by whatever existed beyond the rift. They refused to take part in the new network, isolating their systems and rejecting all communication. They wanted the old world back, the one where strength and independence mattered more than unity. But their silence was short-lived. One night, the sensors on their colony detected a signal, faint, rhythmic, familiar. It wasn't from the humans who had merged. It was from beyond the edge of the galaxy, where no one should have been. The message was brief. You are seen. Within hours, their systems went dark. No ships ever came back from that region again. When word reached Earth, it sent a quiet shiver through every network. The commander received the report in silence. She didn't order retaliation. She simply whispered, "It's begun." She knew this wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was the universe's way of balancing what had been opened. Humanity had gained something extraordinary, but they had also been noticed. Over time, fragments of the old Council archives were recovered. Among them was a document that revealed the Council had known about the living network for thousands of years. They had tried to suppress it, fearing what it would mean if lesser species ever awakened to it. The weapon humanity destroyed wasn't meant to kill worlds. It was meant to keep the connections sealed. The Council hadn't been tyrants out of greed. They were guarding against something they didn't understand, and now that seal was gone. Still, humanity didn't crumble. Instead of fear, there was curiosity. The scientists, the thinkers, the explorers all began studying the patterns that emerged in the sky after the rift's collapse. Strange signals danced across deep space sensors, forming shapes too deliberate to be natural. Humanity had changed, yes, but they were still themselves, driven by wonder, stubborn in the face of the unknown. For every mystery that appeared, people came together to face it, rather than turning against one another. It was as if the universe itself had forced them to grow up. Months turned to years. The fleet was rebuilt not as a weapon, but as an expeditionary force. They called it the Horizon Initiative, a promise to seek answers, not war. The commander, older now and quieter, stood once more before her crew. "We began this journey fighting to survive," she said. "Now we continue it to understand. Whatever is waiting out there, we'll face it together, because for the first time in history, humanity isn't divided." The ships launched one by one, their engines glowing softly against the darkness. As they moved past the edge of known space, the faint pulse that once came from the rift returned, not loud, not dangerous, but gentle, like a memory. It wasn't calling them this time. It was guiding them. And then, just before the signal faded completely, something extraordinary happened. For the first time since the rift's collapse, a transmission came through, not from Earth, not from the fleet, but from somewhere beyond. It was faint and full of static, but the voice was unmistakably human. "We made it," it said. "We found the others." The bridge fell silent. The commander felt her chest tighten as she listened to the words. "Who are you?" she whispered. But there was no response, only the sound of a heartbeat echoing softly in the signal. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't fear. It was hope. That night, as the stars stretched before them, humanity realized something profound. The universe wasn't testing them or punishing them, it was evolving with them. Every action, every discovery, every leap forward had rippled across existence, shaping what came next. They weren't small, isolated beings lost in the cosmos anymore. They were part of it, threads woven into something far greater. The commander watched the stars fade into blue as their ships entered jump space. "Maybe this is what the rift was trying to show us," she murmured. "That we were never alone. We just needed to become something that could finally see." In the quiet of space, the fleet disappeared into the horizon, chasing the faint voice that called to them from beyond. Humanity had faced extinction, corruption, and truth itself, and in the end, they didn't just survive. They became the bridge between what was and what would be. Somewhere, deep within the endless dark, the pulse continued. Steady, eternal, alive. Humanity's heartbeat, echoing through the stars. And this time, the galaxy didn't tremble in fear. It listened.